Hello, all you lovely indignant cosmonauts. As always, I am Cosmic, and today, welcome to another episode of Cosmic is Pissed Off About Something. In this fervent episode, we are going to be talking about Bethesda's new review code policy and why it's bad for you, why it's bad for me, and why it's basically bad for everybody. So, if you haven't heard the news, Bethesda have announced that they will no longer be sending review copies out to members of the game's media, traditional press, before launch day of any of their titles. Now, this is not unexpected because many of the video game AAA publishers do this now, and it is a way to essentially affect and manipulate games media press coverage, and it drives me absolutely crazy. Now, like I've said, this is nothing new. Many of the big AAA publishers do this and have been doing this for quite some time. EA do this, Warner Brothers do this, Square Enix do this, a lot of the big AAA publishers do this. And furthermore, not only do they wait until release day or maybe the week after release, but sometimes they also are very selective about who they actually give their review codes to. So why is this a problem, you may be asking yourself? It is unlikely that you're asking that, but why is it a problem? Well, it means that there's no negative coverage, there's no criticism of any kind before actual launch. Now, the also other problem that goes hand in hand with that is the fact that it is essentially a form of censorship that no other entertainment industry has. You look at film, you look at music, you look at books, you look at even art. Any of those entertainment mediums, they don't have this kind of censorship. They have a press and critics and independent critics that are allowed access before the public is to be able to inform the public of what's going on with it. And the video game industry is the only entertainment industry that tries to manipulate the public, tries to manipulate the content that's being put out about its products, and it's downright criminal. It essentially means that they're curating the coverage, meaning that there's no critique, there's no kind of balanced view. All the coverage that is put forward before launch, and if anyone gets a pre-release review copy, it is going to be Let's Players who are going to be NDA'd and only put a certain shine on the game. It is going to be, and I've heard the traditional press talk about this, and I've heard them say that it's bad and they don't like it, but everybody knows that deals and backroom deals for money will still go on for major publications. I'm not saying that they're paid for reviews, but everybody knows that there are certain traditional publications out there, and I'm going to come out and say it, people like IGN in the past have given review scores out that don't reflect pretty much everybody else's view on the product. Do they do this for money? Probably not. Do they do it for exclusive access and exclusive coverage, meaning that they will get more traffic? Probably so. I'm not accusing of any reviewer of being corrupt or any reviewer taking money or backhanded deals or anything like that, but it's been proven in the past. I mean, you look at the firing of Jess Gersman back when in GameSpot, when he reviewed a game that was from a AAA publisher. They didn't like what he had to say, and they essentially got him fired. You can't deny that there's not a sway there, that there is an influence involved in that, and ultimately, this kind of review policy from AAA publishers is probably going to affect most traditional games media press people, but it hurts people like me. It hurts the independent critics, who are the smaller people who try to tell an accurate, full view of the truth of any given product. And it hurts us because publishers aren't going to give us review copies, and AAA publishers in particular, it is very difficult to get review copies from as an independent because they know that you're going to be truthful in what you say, meaning that it's likely you're going to say things that are going to be negative. And so they don't want that. And so they're now trying to curate the content that is formed around their products, which is a form of censorship. There's no two ways about it. If you are selectively deciding on what people are getting review copies dependent on how they view your company, and if they are complicit and if they are willing to do as you say, then that's censorship, because you're not giving fair critique. And it's ultimately, and the most important thing here, the most important thing is that it is ultimately anti-consumer. Now, it's anti-consumer for a number of reasons. First, it promotes pre-orders because there's no negative coverage of the game, there's no criticism leading up to the game's launch title, so people are more likely to pre-order. Now, as you already know, I always tell people do not pre-order no matter what. No matter if it is a 99.9% sure thing, do not pre-order because it is not worth it, because there's always going to be that thing of it's going to turn out like a No Man's Sky, and it is not worth pre-ordering. It promotes business practices like this by pre-ordering, so definitely don't do that. It means that people don't get to see the game as it actually is, in terms of you can't see any negative or criticism about it because you're only seeing curated content. You're only seeing the content that these AAA publishers allow you to see, and that is bad for consumers. And it is something that I feel is indicative of a really bad, deep problem within the games industry, in particular the AAA publishers. It's telling of their viewpoint. It's telling of their perspective on how they view you as a gamer, how they view you as a consumer, and how they view the industry overall. They don't care about art. They don't care about making sure that the product delivered to the customer is top notch. They look upon you and me as a sales figure, and that is it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who think, they should just do it for the art and not for the profit. That's not how business works, and I wouldn't want any company to run like that. But there's got to be a balance. There's a balance between making good business practice and making money, and making sure that the customer is put first, and you can do both. It is not difficult to do both. I have done it myself in previous businesses. Many other people, many thousands of businesses, put the customer first, still make money, and it's a happy marriage in that respect. But the AAA publishers just seem to think that they want to cut corners in any way they can and make sure that they get those sales regardless of how it's done. Now, since this news has come out, one of the biggest defenses I've heard for this day one review code launch nonsense is the fact that even traditional games media journalists, and this drives me crazy, they're basically giving the AAA publishers their own defense by saying, well, you do have a lot of day one patches now. You do have a lot of day one patches, which means you can't really review the game. And, I even saw one editor say that, well, games media is moving away from the traditional preview, review, and that whole final coverage kind of idea. And whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? Because that's not what the games media wanted to do. We didn't want to move over, away from final coverage, doing the traditional preview review thing. We didn't want to do that. That has been forced upon us by the AAA publishers. No one else wanted to do that. It is a system that has systematically been completely manipulated by AAA publishers, and it is getting worse. Now, in regards to the day one patch defense, it's a load of bullshit. And I'll tell you why it's a load of bullshit. Because day one patches shouldn't even exist anyway. Now, regarding the fact that, yes, you have to balance the game, I understand that. But if you're telling me that there's a day one patch that you couldn't have put in a week earlier, or as a publisher and as a developer realize, instead of doing a day one patch, how's about we just release the game a week later? We'll give the developers a week extra to do that patch. Because if the patch is ready on day one, I don't see why it couldn't have been ready 5 days earlier, or having the launch date 5 days later so that it was ready for review. It doesn't make any sense. It's an absolute bullshit excuse that doesn't stand up when you shine a light on it. The whole idea of day one patches is something that AAA developers and publishers started. Why? Because then they can manipulate the review process. Then they can manipulate the coverage, because now they say, you put that review out and it was negative, but we did a day one patch and now the game's different. It's manipulating coverage, it's manipulating the media, and it's ultimately manipulating the public and consumers who buy their products. And it's absolutely disgusting. Another direct cause of this is the fact that this could potentially mean that you get poor coverage from your favourite reviewers, from publications, from traditional games media, because reviewers will now be scrambling for time trying to get through the game and probably not take their time to look at every aspect of it, which means that you won't get a fully rounded, well thought out, in-depth review. What you will get is a rush job from many publications, which means that it has made, as a reviewer, as a games media, as, journalists in general, it's made it less competitive. It isn't as competitive as it is now, because what's happening is the traditional games media, like IGN and things, they will get review copies, that's assured, which means that they will have their review out, and independent critics and smaller critics and smaller publications won't be able to get review copies, so they'll have to buy the game, which is fair enough, that's one thing. But then on top of that, they will have to spend more time actually respecting their audience and understanding what a consumer needs, so their review will be probably a week later than most major publications, which means all the traffic has gone from that point, which means that they're probably, especially for YouTube independent critics like myself, we're probably taking a loss on that easily taking a loss on that. $60 game, probably less than 1,000 views. Maybe, even if you've got 20,000 views, you probably haven't made it up. There's no way you've made that money up. So now it's directly affecting the smaller independents in a really negative way. The fact is, and this is what I'm going to finalise and, come to a conclusion on, is the fact that this is not acceptable. It isn't acceptable. There's no defence for doing this. It is anti-consumer, and it is frankly anti-games industry when you look at it from all sides. It's, it's a form of censorship. It's just beyond me why they think this is okay. And the day one patch defense does not hold up, because there shouldn't be day one patches. The game should be ready. I understand making hotfixes and balance changes, but there shouldn't be a day one patch. There shouldn't be day one patches that, total 5 gigs. It's ridiculous. It's just beyond me. They need to fix this. And frankly, the only way this is going to change is if the consumers and the games media speak out against it, which, to be fair, a lot of the independents and some of the traditional games media outlets are speaking out about this. And the problem is, how do you fix it? Because people talk about boycotting video games, right? But that's only ever going to work when gamers as a community, as a whole, en masse, do it all at the same time, which never really works out because most people want their game. And I understand that. They want the game. They're excited for it. You can't really blame them for that. Ultimately, for the time being, it is a case of consumers sending messages to AAA publishers and developers, bombarding them with Twitter, bombarding them with Facebook, and making sure that the voices are heard, because this is ridiculous. This is so bad, and it is getting worse and worse. It is making games media jobs impossible. It is making it so that coverage is censored, and it's just, I can't even. I just can't. I can't deal with the stupidity and the corruptness of this. Because I love how Bethesda are like, it's supposed to help. And how is it supposed to help? How is it helping? You are manipulating people. You are manipulating journalists. You are manipulating their coverage. And that means that you are directly manipulating consumers and the public. It is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. And I just cannot deal with that. I just cannot stand by and sit there and go, oh, well, it's okay. It's all right. We'll still get the games eventually. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. As for me personally and this channel, I will still review AAA titles. However, I will be buying them. And my review will be a week later probably than everybody else's, but I respect my audience and I want them to know that my content and my videos are a place to get an honest, frank look at a video game and not some rushed bullshit that's curated by the publisher. So if you're angry, go tweet at them, go tell them how disgusting and how corrupt they are, because it is absolutely abhorrent in how they're trying to manipulate people. So that is my rant over. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.